Today we're going to look at population ecology. When we look at population density, it's important to remember that density is how many per area, as opposed to spatial distribution, which is where they are in that area. Be clumped when individuals are clustered in groups like schools of fish or herds of elephants. That may be random when you have maybe a dandelion here or there with no predictable pattern, or it may be uniform, and that would be evenly spaced. Some plants excrete toxins to inhibit the growth of nearby other plants, and so there you have a uniform example. Population growth rate is important, and birth rate and death rate are considered here, as well as individuals immigrating with an I or coming into an area, and immigrating with an E or exiting an area. If the birth rate and plus immigration rate equals death rate and immigration rate, then you have zero population growth. This type of population growth, exponential growth, is not realistic. It looks like a J letter. You have a lag phase and an exponential growth phase. It represents growth without limiting factors. Logistic growth model shows growth with limiting factors, so it is realistic and it is shown with an S curve. It takes into account the carrying capacity, which is the maximum number of individuals in a species that an environment can normally support. Limiting factors the logistic growth model takes into account may be density dependent or density independent. If they're density dependent, they're going to be dependent on the number of organisms in the area. They are usually biotic, such as disease or food availability. If they are density independent, they're usually abiotic, and they are going to be independent of how many organisms are in the area, such as when a tornado comes out and wipes out a whole field, regardless of whether there's 2 grasshoppers or 45,000 there. Plants and animals have different types of reproductive patterns. There are R strategists, which is the rate strategist or R strategy, and these are going to be your smaller organisms with the shorter lifespan, like mice and bunnies. They produce many offspring, versus K strategists, which would be like humans and elephants. They produce few offspring, but there's a lot more parental care, longer lifespan. They're just larger organisms. So human populations are still growing, but not as quickly as in the past. This is a larger graph showing you the zero population growth area at C when the death rate equals the birth rate. Age structure should also be considered, and you've got rapid growth, slow growth, and negative growth shown in different human populations in different countries. Notice that there's male is in green and the female is in orange here, and you have the different age structures here. You can see that there's a high percent of young people in the rapid growth, where it decreases in the slow growth, and it even decreases more in the negative growth shown by Germany. Biodiversity is the variety of life in an area. Sometimes we talk about related terms like species diversity, which is the variety of species in an area, or genetic diversity, which is the variety of genes that are within each species. Things threaten biodiversity. Extinction, loss of a species entirely, overexploitation or excessive use for economic value. Think about how elephants are often killed just for their tusks and their bodies are discarded. Same thing with rhinos for their horns. Habitat loss is often caused by deforestation. Habitat fragmentation can also be very damaging to biodiversity. It involves a barrier that forms that prevents a bear or a bird from accessing its entire range. This can be caused by the building of roads or harvesting of forests. Removing a keystone species can really devastate an ecosystem and reduce biodiversity as well, like sea otters, wolves, beavers. They really play a huge role in an ecosystem. Introduced species can threaten biodiversity. These are the non-native species that often get accidentally transported to a new habitat. They can often become invasive, like kudzu and fire ants. They don't have predators, and they outcompete the native species. This is also shown in Australia with the rabbits. At pollution, including biological magnification. With that, you have an increasing concentration of toxic substances as the trophic levels increase in a food web or chain. So we say don't eat too much tuna because you've got the buildup of toxins in the tissues. And as you go up higher in the food chain, there's more and more toxins that accumulate. Acid precipitation is a type of water pollution that can also threaten biodiversity, caused by burning fossil fuels and these sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides mixed with the water in the air to form sulfuric acid and nitric acid, which can damage living organisms and get into the bodies of both land and water dwelling organisms. Additional types of pollution include eutrophication, when the fertilizers and animal waste, sewage, etc. wash into ponds and waterways, leading to algae growth. This algae uses up a lot of oxygen, and it also keeps the sunlight from going to the lower parts of the waterways. It is a natural process, but these human activities accelerate the process and leads to lack of oxygen. The lack of oxygen is important to remember, causes death of fish and other organisms. Within conservation, we need to consider the difference between renewable and non-renewable resources. Renewable are replaced rather quickly by natural processes like clean air and water. Non-renewable resources such as minerals and fossil fuels take a long time to replace. There are laws put into place to protect. Laws such as the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act have had a good impact on the environment. It's also notable here that another term, indicator species, indicates the health of an environment. So indicator species can provide a sign of the quality of an ecosystem's environment. Frogs are considered indicator species.